Hello everyone, welcome to the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your hosts Bernhard Günther and Laura Matsu. Today's episode will be about the New Age deception and spiritual bypassing. Now, this is a big topic. Before we go into the various New Age beliefs and New Age fallacies and what actually spiritual bypassing is all about, let's talk about what is the New Age or the New Age movement. We heard a lot about it. But it's actually very hard to define in a sense. And if you look back into history, then you see that the New Age movement started about in the late 19th century with the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky. And the Theosophical Society's intention was fusing the essence of all religions, basically into one world religion. So taken from all kinds of spiritual tradition, East and West, occult, esoteric, and, uniforming it into one teaching. But the problem what occurs with that a lot of these teachings then become distorted, corrupted, just pick and choose. They become oversimplified and can result in a lot of distortion and deceptions, essentially. Now, over the years, the New Age has itself manifested especially or started to become more popular starting probably in the 50s, but then 60s and 70s with the hippie movement, the counterculture, the psychedelic movement, and also the human potential movement. And we talked about it in a recent podcast about psychedelics and medicine plants, where we explored the creation basically of the hippie movement, or how the CIA and the Matrix control system helped to create a counterculture, so to speak, to distract people from what's going on in their everyday lives in the world, and just focus on peace, love, and light, drugs, make love, and just get high, basically. So a lot of that has been actually engineered purposely via social engineering. And again, I refer to our last podcast about that, about psychedelics, medicine plants, and chasing peak experiences. Now, the New Age movement also manifests itself in the UFO community with various UFO religions or UFO cults around a certain channeled material by aliens, or the Galactic Federation of Light, with aliens supposedly here coming to save us, to beat the Cabal, take down the Illuminati, and supply us with technology and zero-point energy and all of that. Now, that's also actually almost a topic on its own. And it also ties into what used to be the 2012 movement, right around the Mayan calendar, when supposedly humanity should have awakened and we should have ascended already years ago. And that's clearly dying out, or has died out. And we see it also manifest these many New Age beliefs and pop spiritual teaching, so to speak, in various festivals, so-called conscious festivals, like Lightning in the Bottle, Rainbow Gatherings, Symbiosis, Burning Man, and all of that. Now, it's very important to understand that, New Age beliefs are not all wrong or false, but the way the deception works is basically truth mixed with lies. Or, as I mentioned before, oversimplified spiritual truths, leaving out certain important knowledge, suppressing certain knowledge. Suppression of knowledge is the name of the game. And people who are aware of my work and also Laura's work, we've talked about in recent podcasts about occult forces, the hyperdimensional matrix, and how deceptive these forces can be, right? And in the New Age, this is actually not considered at all. It's mostly about archangels, spirit guides, and all these positive forces of higher realms that are just here to guide us and save us and support us, when that is most often not the fact, actually. Now, I think the best way to talk about the New Age deception is to talk about various New Age beliefs, or New Age fallacies, if I would call them.
Yeah, so we're just going to kind of go through these different ideas, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and just speak it about our own personal experiences with all of them. And I think it's also really important. Like, I also see, it's interesting. It's like, it's always the ego hijacking one side or the other But, people start doing some deeper self work, and then they start basically like shaming people who are still in like a new age phase, basically. So I think it's really important to not use like these ideas as like a way of like superiority or anything on either side. So like whether you have a new age belief, which I think the key word in that is about transcending. And I think it's Ken Wilber who had a really good quote where it's like transcend and include, which is more like, yes, we're supposed to reach higher levels of being. We're in order to get there, we have to include like our basically like physical mortal experience and use that as a material to get there. So like bridging the divine with our like earthly, life. And I think the thing with the new age too, it's like basically positive brainwashing in a sense, like on a very simplistic level. It's like, yes, once you start understanding the basics of positive psychology, if you say a certain thing in your mind and you create some serotonin and dopamine and you create this positive emotional reaction, and yes, it does feel good and you can get yourself to different states of being. And to be honest, like even that is like an uncommon skill. Like a lot of people don't really realize how important their thoughts are. And I think the new age is also just getting kind of like lopsided in that sense. Like it's just about overly focusing on the positive and ignoring the negative. And like if people have like this is a really popular t-shirt that's like bad vibes or no, good vibes only, and like basically just ignoring aspects of yourself. And I think that can be useful at some points. Like I know for myself, like when I was actually quote unquote going through my new age phase, I was like breaking out of a really long period of depression, and I really needed to give myself a break and also show myself that I could be happy, And I think that's where it starts is like it helps them feel good for a moment. And it's almost like taking antidepressants. It's like spiritual antidepressants, You're not supposed to go on them forever. However, especially for people who go through really bleak periods, feeling happy, it becomes almost euphoric and a drug because you're so used to not feeling happy. And I think that's what people kind of get hooked on with the new age thing. And then at a certain point, it basically just stops working, and it becomes even more apparent that there's like some friction between their external personality self and what's really going on under the surface. And over time, like they just become more and more disembodied, and and you can tell too. So I think that's really just important to note that it's like, it's also, I can see it, how it was useful as a stage on my own journey. And, there's also things that like maybe people would just like throw out the baby with the bathwater and categorize as new age. Like tarot cards, for instance, were most likely brought to the mainstream because of the new age movement. If I think about it, like probably happened in the 80s. And like even now, like tarot and astrology has gotten very popular, which I think is a good sign. But then also when that happens, it always gets distorted as well. So you see that happening at any point when it gets too popular, because I also feel that, like I think, on the opposite side of the coin, there's probably a reason why, well, I know at least in like traditional like Buddhism, the reason that why they kept certain teachings away from like people who had not been practicing for a few years is because they could easily fall into self-deception with them, like they could easily use them to trick themselves, and it actually ends up working against you. Like I feel like once you actually can, this is aside from like having a very strong intellectual mind, like spiritual intellectual mind, one of the hardest things to break in people are people who are really good at making themselves feel invincible through spiritual techniques, because it's really important to actually being able to feel your own suffering and use that as a catalyst for your own evolution. So as long as you're using like it, but basically spirituality, basically, who's that person who said like it's like dopamine for the masses, or
opiate.
Opiate for the masses. Exactly. Like this is what the new age does. It becomes an opiate for the masses, and you can use, and that's kind of what happens in the new age. They can use any sort of spiritual teaching and use it to basically kill their pain, when honestly, like, and I don't think I'm being like goth, but suffering is actually what makes us human. And I feel like that's actually the key to our own like high levels of being and compassion and humility and all of these basically quote unquote noble traits.
Yeah. Well, what you just alluded to, basically this new age deception and some of the new age beliefs you already alluded to ties into spiritual bypassing. Yeah. Right. And spiritual bypassing is, in that sense, using spiritual practices or even spiritual higher truths to bypass, avoid deeper inner processes, even basic psychological processes, and the constant pursuit just to feel better, the pursuit towards pleasure and avoidance of pain, right? And this idea that love is just high emotional bliss, and when you're down, then you're negative and you judge yourself for that, right? Or you use various spiritual truths that are high from a higher perspective, like all this is love,
Yeah.
But then don't really understand what love is and judge anything else as bad and negative that does not feel good. And essentially these New Age teachings or deceptions work by, as you also talked about, just following feel-good teachings, whatever makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Right? It can be very, very deceptive. And ties also a bit into this idea of resonating.
Exactly.
We all use that, and there's truth to it. You resonate with that, but it doesn't resonate with this. But to truly resonate with something, you have to also be able to truly tune into your true self, deep intuition beyond the buffers, the wounds or emotional biases and all these things, because you can literally resonate with lies, right? I mean, a lot of fundamentalist Christians resonate with the Bible in literal terms and believe the earth is only, 5,000 years old. They resonate with it. They feel it. And on the opposite hand of the coin, a lot of people, reject certain teachings or information because it creates uncomfortable feelings within them. It creates fear. And then they judge it as fear-based or fear-mongering because it brings up uncomfortable feelings, and reject it because it doesn't feel good. So that's kind of a general description of how the New Age movement, beliefs work, so to speak.
Yeah, I like this quote from the book, Spiritual Bypassing, I think it's called, by Robert Augustus Masters. Aspects of spiritual bypassing include exaggerated attachment, emotional numbing and repression, overemphasis on the positive, anger phobia, blind or overly tolerant compassion, weak or too porous boundaries, lopsided development, cognitive intelligence often being far ahead of emotional and moral intelligence. Or it can be also, anyways, there's multiple, I feel like, combinations of that, meaning lopsided in some way, like overemphasis on the heart and then not the mind is also another example, right. Or quote unquote, the heart. Like sometimes I feel like it's not even in a true heart space, just whatever makes me feel good. Debilitating judgment about one's negativity or shadow side, devaluation of the personal relative to the spiritual. That's interesting because I feel like it's, I'm not sure what he means there, but I feel like it's more like they overemphasize my personal relative experience, which is of course valid because it's happening. But to the multidimensional experience, like if it's my truth, then that's all that matters, and it lives in this like very narcissistic, solipsistic like reality basically, and delusions of having arrived at a higher level of being. And that also this isn't related to spiritual bypassing. I think it was kind of when Reggie Ray, the meditation teacher who I've quoted a few times, he said in a talk, he's like, when you think that something's happening, like in your own spiritual practice, nothing's happening. And when you think that nothing's happening, something's happening. And I can relate to that because there's periods, I think even before I met you, there was stuff going on in my life, but like, and like I was going through my own processes and stuff, but I mostly felt it was just very kind of calm, and that's when actually stuff was really happening. And then when I thought that I was like, oh my God, I'm so blissed out, I'm like going to be enlightened soon, like that's actually when I like nothing was happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go into some of the common New Age beliefs and traps. And of course, we're going to go into more of this in part 2. We're going to go more into depth, maybe also put some of the topics that might trigger people in the second part, because that's just, it's easier for us to deal with people who are triggered that way if there's less of them. Yes. So, and once again, like also, to just recognize when you've experienced this is also, okay, doing like shadow work on New Age work is also not judging or shaming yourself, but seeing your tendency to do these things within yourself. Like I even know reading that, like I still engage in aspects of spiritual bypassing myself all the time, because it's like, it's also, the human tendency, the automatic kind of reaction is to avoid pain. It's natural. Like, so this is also something that we all have to kind of just constantly check ourselves on and be aware of, rather than be like, oh, now that I know what the New Age is, and I do shadow work, I'm like so much more superior to the New Agers, and not get into this like duality kind of what do you call it? Just the superiority. Interestingly, I see people get into this position of superiority after they get out of their New Age phase, and it's like this new spiritual ego gets developed. It's like just different types of spiritual egos.
I have fallen into the trap as well, and like also full disclosure, just like you, I had definitely my New Age phase and fallen into all the traps of the beliefs we're going to talk about. But it also relates to what you just mentioned at the beginning, because the New Age pill, so to speak, is so alluring for people, because when you come to a place of like, just suffering and just quote unquote waking up, and all this shit comes up and you don't know how to handle it, and, maybe dabble in psychology, but then you come across certain New Age beliefs that, they seem to be very empowering at first, but in the long run, very disempowering and even damaging. Right? It's like an opiate, like a drug you take, like a belief system.
Yeah.
Like even in my early days, I all believed in the space brothers are coming here to save us, the Galactic Federation of Light. I remember that whoever was the channeler, like bringing new material every week. I couldn't wait for it. And they're going to take out the cabal for us, and all this shift is happening, which was supposed to happen 10 years ago, and all these things. So it just feeds you all the time and keeps you waiting for more and more and more, and just creates more buffers and calming. Yeah. And also what it creates, if not taken full self-responsibility. But then you get also what I definitely took the very distorted form of you create your own reality, right? Which is also the solipsistic view of the New Age, which is very distorted in a sense of basically that only your mind creates the truth. There's no objective truth. There's only my or your truth. And everything you experience in reality is because of the so-called law of attraction, which also been somewhat distorted.
That's an interesting thing, because not in the way that they say it, but I believe that we have these deep unconscious stores that are waiting to manifest in our life as like lessons, essentially, but the fact of the matter is a lot of this is actually below our conscious mind.
Exactly.
That's the tricky part.
That's because I got myself, definitely even in my New Age phase, just think positive thoughts, reject the negative, and, also overestimating my level of being, my quote unquote awakened state, because I mistook just feeling good and bliss for love.
Yeah. So right? That kind of, just to note, this is our first point. We're going to be talking about this, you create your own reality thing. And sorry, can I go on to my own experience? Because I remember I actually was very drawn to those ideas like right after my own awakening, because I was such a negative spiral. Like I had the most negative self-talk, mostly against myself, but also against the world in a way. And I had to break myself out of it. So I literally brainwashed myself on like ketamine, listening to positive psychology and stuff like that. And I read The Secret, but The Secret was like such a simple book that I couldn't take it seriously. Yeah. But I did get into Abraham Hicks's stuff for a period. Yes. And that actually helped me to a certain extent. But there was then parts, like I just realized it just didn't quite fit, because I was, and not only that, yes, like we can manifest a lot of things in our lives through our own intention. Like it's really powerful. It also just kind of shows us the power of our own intentions, I think, above everything, but at the same time, it's not like unless you're a master magician, like you're not the grand conductor of your reality all the time. Like you're working with like a bunch of different forces at once, and mostly unconscious. So, and then on top of it, I realized at a point, so I was like doing like manifestation rituals, and I was like really committed, like doing them every day, like having a detailed list, visualizing a lot. And I was drawing things into my reality that I quote unquote thought I wanted, but they didn't end up giving me that inner fulfillment that I thought I needed. Yeah. Well, I thought I needed, but that I actually needed. So I realized, yes, like I have the ability to consciously create my own reality, but I don't really know what's good for me anyway. And not only that, there's also, I'll create it to a certain extent, but there's always going to be this deep unconscious, which is going to be aligning the universe to give me the life lessons I need to go through anyway.
Yeah. And also like put into question when you say you create your own reality, who's that you and I to begin with? What we're talking about when you say I create my own reality, what I am are you referring to? What you know?
It's usually like the limited, like their ego.
Exactly. It's the personality and what you also, because I have the same done with, I also got into Abraham Hicks. And again, like even those teachings, it's not black and white. There's some good stuff and it helped me in a certain way. But what also it did when you can easily get into victim shaming. Right. Yeah. In the sense of my victim blaming myself, but already my issue has been guilt and shame to begin with. And then shit would happen in my life. I'm like, oh my God, my thoughts, this is all my fault. I need to think better, more positive. I need to be more in a positive mindset all the time. So I started to feel guilty when I felt quote unquote negative or felt angry and all these emotions. And it was actually what happened. It got me more out of body. It became a mental fuck, for lack of better word, with this whole New Age idea on you create your own reality.
You do though, but maybe it's just more on this embodied level. Like it's like whatever. Like you are attracting to yourself.
I agree, exactly. But it happens on this very subconscious level.
Yeah, and also it happens on an embodied level. So it's just happening in your head, and you're just thinking positive thoughts, and like your body isn't on board. You know, it's like the difference between like if you're in flow, you're in flow in an embodied way, and you're drawing things to you, which are usually makes your life a little bit more graceful because you are in almost that close to that frequency of grace. You know, when you're in the zone. But then if your just mind is on board, then your body is actually drawing towards different experiences.
Yeah, and very much in the New Age Specialist Secret, basically the ego has hijacked this concept.
Yeah.
If you create your own reality, it becomes most material gain. And also what, as you mentioned, when you manifest a lot of things, what you thought you wanted, but, you know, didn't realize that's not really what you quote unquote needed anyway, or truly wanted from a deeper soul perspective, that a lot of us, we trying to manifest or want something that is actually coming from the conditioned personality.
Yeah,
just social, cultural conditioning of what you think you want is not your true self. You literally have been programmed that way.
Yeah.
Or coming from wounds and trauma of a lack, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can actually create more Gordian knots, as it's called in esotericism, or creating more karma. Right? By forcefully like trying to manifest something. And on a deeper occult level, you can also make contracts, trap of agreements with occult hostile forces via calling in entities, you know, spirit guides, archangels and whatnot to help you manifest something. And they will gladly help you, but it's like you're making literally like a pact with the devil, a Faustian pact, right? Like you're paying a price for it.
Yeah, and it's also, that kind of leads into the other point we wanted to go into, like focus on the positive and avoid the negative, which is part of that, but not exactly the same. And I think that that's also interesting because, I mean, not to sound also kind of New Age cliche, but what's positive and what's negative is really valued by your own perception. Like, so I feel like in the New Age kind of belief system, focus on the positive is like whatever makes you feel good, and ignore the negative is whatever makes you feel bad. But actually what's creating you either liking or disliking things are your own like kind of karmic preferences. You know, it's like, I think on another podcast, or maybe we talked about this in the workshop, it's like they talk about in Buddhism, the nidanas, which is a place where you can actually have free will. So a lot of our free will is already set in motion. It's already in the past. But we also have these gaps between the nidanas, which is between feeling and thirst. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right. You know what I'm talking about. But anyways, the gap between feeling and thirst is where you can actually neutralize or create positive or negative karma, in the sense that, and this is also the thing, so when you have a feeling arise in you, you can either choose to push it away or grasp towards it and create more of it. And so like this is also the preference between positive and negative. It's like we have this feeling and we want to create more of it, so we actually end up creating more karma through doing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, but the point is also really that what you mentioned, alluded to, that positive and negative is highly subjective.
Exactly.
Because when I look back, also understand you create your own reality. It creates this the illusion that you live in a solipsistic bubble, right? Mm-hmm. That's only you. When actually you're multidimensional being in the you're intersecting with realities of other people, the collective, other dimensions influencing you, and that we're actually transducers of higher energies.
And the self is also manifest in everything, you know?
Exactly. But we're also constantly, infused by these higher forces, the hidden forces of life, as Sri Aurobindo talked about, that are not necessarily all adverse hostile forces, but divine forces, inspiration. But it's like, the more we're coming from our ego personality, the lower nature of all the conditioning or wounding, the more we are subjected to these lower forces who act through us and want more of that, it's grasping what you talked about, right? Or based on fear or based on lack and just constantly striving towards making you just feel better and avoid the dark, right? Neglect the dark. But as Carl Jung said, one doesn't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious to rise everything up that's in the way of our true creative potential, actually.
But that's also, I feel like the true self that's creating reality is in these unconscious stores, basically.
Right. And, for example, like when you look back, anybody, I like the exercise of recapitulation. When you go back into your life, you see that there's actually, and really get in this observer-witness position, and really see there's a thread through your life. There's almost, I see it, at least from my experience looking back, there's a higher force has been guiding me. There's something beyond me that has created it all. Or it's my higher self or divine. I don't know. There's something else like this mystery, this unknown force.
Yeah, but that's also connected to you.
Exactly. So it's like I just experience it as me as this separative ego consciousness, right? This higher self, whatever words you might want to put in. But when you look back at certain junctures in my life and experiences that were really hard and brought a lot of suffering and pain, but looking back, they brought me to actually something more better, quote unquote, and more positive, right? But it was a necessary rite of passage I had to go through, like a deep learning experience. So, that's what I mean when you feel down, or we have this sometimes, in our own process, we feel quote unquote negative, down, pain comes up, sadness, loneliness, anger, but there's an opportunity to work through this on a somatic embodied level, and then we can rise to a higher level and have more true positive experiences. If you want to talk about positive more, it's striving towards your true self, more what's in alignment with the divine, right? And true love, which is just beyond just an emotion, but also relates to just this wider, expansive awareness and understanding.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like true love is also just a sense of like connection, really. It's not about like this blissed out feeling. It's about like this recognition. It's like, I see you as me, it's like when you just really recognize, and that you can experience that with anything. And it's also in relation to everything around us. And, like in a sense, like these ideas, like we are all one and like love is all there is on a higher level. It's true, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be nice to us and love us and believe all the same things as us or whatever. And it's also, to not be afraid of those feelings that come up when we encounter people who have like really different beliefs than us. And even I have to even check myself on this New Age thing too. Definitely, like I got frustrated with New Age people on my posts because they also tend to be very like telling you the way things are instead of also allowing you to have your own experience. Basically, they're like, like this is actually the truth, like the ultimate truth. So it's not even really about my truth or your truth. I find that a lot of New Agers like to tell other people what to do. It becomes like almost like this were those people, religious people who stand on the street corner and like evangelical, I guess, like you haven't found the light, like join the
it
galactic
becomes also sometimes very passive aggressive because most often suppress the anger.
Exactly, because there's suppressed anger. And it's interesting, like you also can't understand love, I think, unless you also understand the whole host of dimensions, meaning like your suffering, your pain. By the way, like, this is also how the true bodhisattva is born. It's like, it's like that quote, I think it's Leonard Cohen or Rumi. It's like the crack is where the light gets in. Like that's actually where true love is born, not in this amazing over romanticized bliss bubble, but in your own suffering. That's actually where true love is born. And you're like, wow. It's like the exercise of Tonglen in Buddhism, which I'm sure some of you know, where it's like where you're meditating on your own pain and you really connect to it. And then you ask yourself, like, if I feel this and other people are feeling this suffering too, and you don't get there by being like, everything's amazing. Like, I'm so blissed out. Like, why isn't anyone else blissed out? You guys are bad vibes. It's actually through recognizing like, wow, like this is the human condition has a lot of trials and tribulations. And then if you look out there, if you're really grounded and embodied and looking at there, like there's people are all suffering in their own way. And that's actually what opens you up to like really just, I feel me personally loving them because it's like, wow, like we're all in this kind of like trance of like feeling like we're not worthy or feeling like, guilty or shameful or like we're sinners, and we're all in this trance together. And yes, like reality is beautiful, especially, I mean, we went for this amazing hike in nature and it's incredible. But yeah, at the same time, like there's all these people walking through this forest and like, I mean, truly, like if you're connected to nature, you would be like in awe of like what's around you all the time. But you just see people, like gotta get to the car, like dragging their kid's stroller, like all these kinds of things. And so there's a lot of ways that we try and avoid our own suffering, I feel. And that's actually, and there's nothing, and that's also the thing is like there's through feeling your own pain and being able to approach your own suffering, you develop a healthy relationship with it. And I think that's really what's most important is like the more that you have an aversion towards certain feelings, the more that you're going to be like, oh, I got to put on my psychic shield before I go out or else somebody's going to throw their bad vibes at me and I won't be able to handle it. But if you like actually deal with your own anger and sadness, if somebody else projects anger and sadness at you in the world, you're just going to be like, you're going to have a relationship, an experience with dealing with your own anger and sadness. So you're going to be like, oh, okay, there's that guy acting out in the way that I'm familiar with myself because I've gone through that darkness myself, and you can have an easier way of relating to other people too.
Yeah. And that's also the true meaning of we're all one in that sense, that deeper recognition, not assuming we're all one, yes, obviously from a higher perspective, but we're not all the quote unquote same in light of soul individualization, soul evolution, or level of being. Yeah. Especially if 8 billion people on this planet, they're very young souls on this planet, which also ties in the topic of organic portals, quote unquote soulless humans, which I've written about. There's an essay on it on my site, veilofreality.com. A topic that has organic portals, soulless humans, a topic on itself, and that essay or this idea has also been very distorted, also used as a judgment, people labeling people organic portals, feeling better than others, or feeling they're evil, which has nothing to do with evil. Organic portals can be used by other forces, in Agent Smith syndrome but it's they have their place in the function of the cosmos, right? And also on another level, when it relates to psychopaths, sociopaths, like people who are truly empty shells, but driven by draconian, hyperdimensional, cold, hostile forces and have no humanness in them. We project a lot of qualities. We can project a lot of qualities onto people they don't necessarily tend to have, especially world leaders. When you really look at it deeper, the world is quote unquote run by psychopaths, and we project, and they can hide behind this carefully crafted mask of sanity, by the way. They can, manipulate emotions and show a certain facade that seems to be very grounded, seems to be even very emotional, intelligent, or even spiritually. But it's a mask, right? And that's where the manipulation comes in. And when we assume that everybody is the same, or that everybody thinks and feels like I do, then we get into trouble, right? So it's also not about getting into judgment, just understanding like how vast this existence reality is, multidimensional, and how the divine express himself or herself in all kinds of life forms or humans.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is like, we are all one and like all is love. Like that doesn't mean everyone is a perfect human being who doesn't do anything, quote unquote, like that causes more suffering, I guess you could say. Like even like people who are quote unquote enlightened, like Buddha, he had his life flash before his eyes and he saw that he was like everything, meaning at some point in his life, some version of a psychopath, I'm sure Buddha was, as that's the all encompassing thing. It has to include everything, and it can't just include the positive or things that we deem to be the positive sides of life. And then that also, it's also that certain things are bad too. Yes, like most of us don't want to be friends with sociopaths or narcissists or people like that for the most part, but that doesn't mean, quote unquote, these people are just inherently bad. Yes, they do bad things, but ultimately, if we want to reach a true place of compassion, it's also being like, wow, like just the immense suffering that's there, like it's like even if someone's a completely even if someone's a completely like soulless being, like they cannot actually experience like life themselves. Like they have to feed on other people. Can you imagine being in that state? That's like kind of what the Tibetans call like the hungry ghost realm. It's like you just have to feed on other people. You can't be like a source of like light unto yourself. And like I can only imagine living in that realm permanently. Like that can't be good, because I know for myself, like the deepest source of inner fulfillment for me has been realizing that like I can anchor like true love within myself completely, not dependent on any external circumstances. Actually, that's, I feel, the only really true state of love. If it's like, yes, we can get inspired and feel a connection with other people, but when it's able to arise in me and it's not because of something that happened externally, although it can be influenced by that. And then it also, sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to touch upon that, but also then be careful of another New Age trap, which is blind or idiot compassion and lack of boundaries, right? Because of not wanting to hurt another person, or afraid of saying no, or people pleaser, and just be nice, But sometimes you got to be in warrior stance, and you cannot, as Don Juan said in Castaneda's teachings, to fight the predator with niceness, right? There needs to be sometimes a boundary and say no,
Yeah, exactly.
And removing ourselves from certain situations, certain people, and not fall into idiot compassion.
Yeah, exactly. And then also understanding that in order to practice true compassion, we also have to have compassion for ourselves, and like not from a self-centered point of view, but if you're not actually paying attention to how you feel, honoring those feelings, then like how can you practice compassion with another person as well? And it's also like it kind of really leads into like another thing. It's because they're afraid to get angry, and make boundaries. So like this idea that like anger is bad, in a sense, and anger is just a very like fiery energy. And yes, like I personally don't feel that, like taking your unhealed pain and projecting on another person is ultimately ends up well most of the time. However, like that fiery energy, it can be put to good use. Like for myself, when I get angry and I really meditate on it and I feel into the pain, I also use that fiery action because it's like I can see that there's something like I feel like it's like I can see that there's something that doesn't feel quite right that I need to speak out against. So it's also being able to feel into that emotion, and it's not necessarily anger. I think we only express it as anger in certain instances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it ties also, anger phobia ties into conflict phobia, right? People are afraid, also ties in light of the part of the New Age deception, in light of the matrix control system is also, with installing beliefs like just focus on the positive, ignore the negative, to not speak out against the dark side, in general, what's happening in the world. Do not stand up against evil or point out or shine light into darkness, right? To just be nice and just, we not look at it because it disturbs us too much. We don't want to give it any energy. That's the idea. That's the illusion that by looking at the dark, the New Age deception gives you the idea then by looking at that, you will manifest it even more in your life by giving it attention.
Which has some truth to it.
It has only truth if you get too invested in it. If you can, there's a say, it's about making the darkness conscious or the shadow conscious, but not lingering on it.
But interestingly, like when you're more phobic of something or a certain topic, that actually creates this emotional suppression. So if you want to draw anything towards yourself even more, I feel like when you start really suppressing something into the unconscious intentionally, that creates because every time an emotion or experience that kind of is upsetting arises, I feel that's actually amazing opportunity, because for the most part, the things that are driving our lives are very unconscious, and we're not able to actually experience them directly through like a feeling that comes up or an experience with another person. But if an experience arises, like, between, so say if like, a couple keep getting into fights, and every time they fight, they're like, conflict is bad. Good couples don't fight ever. And then they just suppress it more and more, like, and they don't actually deal with it. Like eventually it's just going to bubble up, and it's just going to create more distance between them. So in spite of like trying to do that in order to keep their kind of like idea of what a healthy relationship is, it's creating the suppression, and it's almost like you're kind of logging up the dam.
And it creates unconscious resentment, which again results in, mention it again, passive aggressiveness, which we also see by a lot of what you mentioned, quote unquote, New Agers on social media, right? That this underlying energy. But, on the opposite side of the hand, or the other toxic there's toxic conflict when people are just feeding off of conflict and drama and constantly install it and, project on others and get into fights or arguments just for the release valve, so to speak, to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
Right. And they're taking responsibility.
Yeah, I know even myself, like I grew up in an environment where my parents were fighting a lot. And I think for anyone who had that experience, like you can actually feel comfortable. Like this is also, comfortable in your family. Like your family dynamic will set the tone, and a lot of families were the opposite, like really avoided conflict. But then there was like this weird energy in their family and there wasn't like a really heart connection because they were constantly avoiding like speaking the truth about what was going on, So it's two opposite sides of the coins. And also if you grow up in a family that has like lots of abuse, like that's your comfort zone, so there's like kind of two sides of the same coin. And it's also about like this idea of like just to basically do whatever you think feels good and whatever. But what people think, like what actually feels really good in a weird roundabout way is to feel your emotions no matter what they are and feel them as they come up. Like that's a true act of compassion, I feel. And what we think feels good, like from the modern perspective, is like watching Netflix and like eating like certain foods and like, like going on social media and like looking at memes that validate our belief system. And like, the things that feel good are often feeding into our own pathologies a lot of the time. So we have to really be careful. And this is also interesting. Like, there's like, I find that like a lot of people who end up on the spiritual path, especially when they come from like history of drug addiction, they have to watch themselves for getting addicted to these other kind of forms of spiritual bypassing because they already have a tendency to try and escape their feelings. Yeah. And I noticed that too. Like, I'll just tell a little story. Like it was really funny. I was in detox with people who had been addicted for a really long time. And what used to actually, this is also my own lesson, what got on my nerves was there was this one guy and he was annoying everyone, but he was being so overly positive and like just so blissed out, like just living the life and detox, that it was just annoying people. It was like too much. And I feel like in many ways, like New Agers almost like that over kind of emphasis, on like just feel good and like I feel amazing and not considering other people's experience. And then also just getting addicted to that kind of peak state, Yeah.
And also then it doesn't become authentic anymore because you feel that underneath there's something else happening. And also the idea that you also, if you need to tell anyone how amazing you feel and all this, that can also be very narcissistic, to get that validation or just, ties into the trap of comparison or even subtle or not so subtle superiority complex we all can fall into, right?
Yeah, this is kind of just like mistaking emotional highs for like love and a state of being. Like when we feel this like, and this is also where it's tricky. And this is, I feel like people could understand this a bit better because I feel everyone has fallen, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have fallen in love at some point with someone. And it's been this extremely like blissful experience. And then they took those feelings and they thought that meant that this was a good relationship for them and this is a great person for them when it was just that feeling of love that they got hooked on, and this is also, I think in the New Age movement, they mistake these emotional highs for love when love is just like a state of being, and love is actually like truly grounded and connected. It's not about being like, oh, I feel amazing. And it's like, you're almost caught in this like fantasy world in this New Age way, or when you're in this romantic bubble, which is kind of the same thing. It's like, there's a very and this is why I think the New Age is appealing, is that like it really plays on our tendencies to fantasize and romanticize things.
Yeah. And from an esoteric perspective, actually, love is knowledge. Love is not knowledge, is gnosis. And this has nothing to do with intellectual knowledge or memorizing or reading thousands of books. It's not a mental concept of knowledge. It's just a higher state of being. Right, a high level of awareness, which you kind of also see yourself in others, or you see the interrelationship of life. You understand, the duality of life. You're right, that the one cannot exist without the other. That's another irony. Like the consistent focus of the positive is also, denying duality, because the positive cannot exist without the negative by definition, right, in this 3D reality. So it's all about, and all esoteric teachings talk about the unification or like quote unquote transcending duality, not by a mental process or thinking yourself out of it, but by the unification of the light and dark within you, so to speak, right? To bring it all to awareness. And like you said before, the fallacy, New Age fallacy of just do what you feel like doing, or just follow your heart, can be very deceptive. Because I followed my feelings of what I thought my heart was telling me, and it got me into, situations that were not aligned with truth, basically, right? I was deceived. I was deceiving myself in basic romance or other situations, right? And like you said before, it's like telling a drug addict, do whatever you feel like, follow your feelings, and it's going to go for the next fix. Yeah. And so people go also for the next fix in New Age beliefs, to the next channel material. It ties also into spiritual materialism in a sense.
Yeah. And that's also another thing too, is like there's so much New Age stuff to work through. You could easily just spend like probably lifetimes doing New Age things, and they're never going to run out of like a new fairy angel deck to buy or some new channeled material. And it's never ending. And it also ends up being like a rabbit hole in itself. Like it gets like to the point where it's like, it's so out there. And I'm not saying like out there, I don't like out there ideas, but it's so out there that there's no way that you could actually confirm it in any sense. And not in an intellectual sense, just in any sense, like, and I think that's also what people get caught in. It's like, I think like bringing it back to that point, like human beings love to fantasize for the most part, especially like more spiritual kind of type human beings. Like we love kind of romanticizing and fantasizing life. I think the higher evolution of that is like kind of the mystic who's like very connected with nature and just in awe with reality, so that's like the kind of the positive manifestation. But then also, getting grounded sometimes, and getting grounded, I feel, is really getting into our earthly experience, like facing the things that scare us, facing death. And then, this is like, we've talked about this in other podcasts. It's like when we get up and caught up in hope, which is what a lot of this New Age teachings seem to cater to, is like hoping that like the world is going to ascend and the aliens are going to come and all these things. It's like we're actually ignoring our fears, and this creates like kind of a fake personality in that sense. And I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to touch upon that about just following your feelings, follow your heart, and also then the mind is demonized. Well, there's truth to that. We need to get out of the head, right? And not believe all our thoughts, but it's also clearing the mind and developing to the higher intellect, right? The divine infused intellect, and using the mind properly, not as the master, but as a tool. And that entails also learning, for example, the basics of critical thinking, which it's completely lacking in the New Age. And I was lacking that in my New Age days. I was, when I got into it, I was just diving down the rabbit hole and was just, taking everything in like a sponge and not questioning, but just, that sounds fascinating, that must be true, or that feels good, that must be true. And I was deceiving myself in so many ways because I lacked just basic critical thinking, right? And just going by belief. And like you said, a lot of the things you cannot verify, or people would then argue though, well, it's verified because it resonates with me, right? And again, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, there's truth to resonating, absolutely, on this deeper level. I resonate with certain teachings, you do, and there's a lot of truth in that. But it can be very deceptive, right? If we just go by, for example, whatever makes us feel good, right? And it's also ignoring the process. I feel that New Age is also stuck in this idea just that this, quote, what they call ascension process, the awakening process, is just more bliss, more love, you ascend into 5D and all of that. It becomes a mental concept, but not understanding that the awakening process entails the descent into hell, to deal with all the stuff you have not looked at, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also, just to reaffirm what you said, like, yes, the mind is actually very interesting too, because like if you're truly connected, like a higher state of awareness, it's very objective, and your emotions are by nature very subjective. It's like, I like or I dislike this thing. So, that's also based on our own kind of preferences and habits as well. And so, when we can truly access this higher state of consciousness, like higher mind, essentially, like it's going to be able to see things clearly, it can also call us us out when we're deceiving ourselves if we're really connected to that. And our emotions, like, so if I'm like sad, it doesn't mean like the world is going to end, or like I'm depressed, like it's also a feeling that's kind of passing by, to not, either grasp onto these positive states of feelings as a sense that something positive is happening, but just that something's happening. And then if a negative thing is happening, if something, it doesn't mean something's negative is happening, it means that something's happening. Like it has no positive or negative to it. It's just an event that kind of arises. And I think that, also when we have these ideas that don't quite match up with our being as well, that, as you said before, creates this like fake niceness mask. And it's not only New Age people who get caught in this, but I find that anyone who like really just has this idea on like, I'm a good person, and they have to actually create this like false personality based on what they think a good person is, and they have to constantly, like, they have this idea on who they should be all the time, which is what New Age people is like, oh, you just be loving all the time. But if their body actually wants to respond in a way that that doesn't match up with their idea on what nice is, then they judge themselves, or they suppress it and then put on this mask.
And unconsciously, that creates a lot of actually resentment and even hate for themselves, because deep down inside they know they cannot live up to that, and they suppress all the parts that don't live up to that spiritual ideal of being a good and nice spiritual person, which also can be summarized as spiritual correctness, similar as political correctness.
Yeah.
Right? That you have to behave a certain way or dress a certain way. That's a whole other topic in itself. The New Age dress code, or people giving themselves spiritual names and all these things.
Yeah, and and I think with this idea of this mask of fake niceness, it's all about like, the thing is, it's like, I'll give an example. Like, so when I made a boundary recently, I'm sure anyone who knows who's made boundaries, when you make boundaries with someone, they're mostly going to get angry or upset at you. Like, it's not going to bring up comfortable feelings. And then that can actually trigger like guilt and shame in you for making boundaries. And you're like, oh, I'm not a good person because this person responded in that way. But you were just honoring kind of the feelings of your body at that moment and what didn't feel right for you. And that's going to create a quote unquote negative reaction from someone around you. That's also just the way that it works. It's like when you make that boundary, it's like, I can't take this on and play along with this game at the expense of myself with you anymore. And whatever you made the boundary for is going to basically like ricochet back at them, and then they're going to finally experience what they weren't able to experience before, because they were likely using your lack of boundaries to kind of just connect and like feed on your own energy. But see, this is a really good example. If instead you had this idea like of being fake nice to them all the time, it's like you actually cannot make that boundary, because to make a boundary, you really have to be firm and direct. It has nothing to do with niceness. It's just being very clear and direct. And so, that's going to create a reaction that you might not enjoy, and that can trigger some guilt and shame. And then automatically, a New Age person can be like, oh, like I shouldn't have done that. Like I need to be more loving and more patient, which could be true. Like maybe in this instance I'm referring to and using as inspiration, I could have made the boundary in like a more grounded place. But sometimes you also just have to make a boundary in a really firm way. Like, another example, I think it was like in India, like I was on a bridge and a guy with a motorcycle was like literally like revving behind this long line of people and like almost running them over, and everyone was getting annoyed. And then finally, like I turned and like just gave him like a death stare, like a look like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And like somebody came up to me and like patted me on the shoulders, like, oh, I saw that look you gave him. Good for you. Because finally someone's, actually had a natural reaction to the thing of this guy basically trying to kill all of us slowly. Like it was like it's like this protective mechanism that kicks in.
I think what comes to me about that is also maybe the understandably in the New Age, the overemphasis of the divine feminine, right? And especially men, I understand we need to get more into our emotions and be more vulnerable, right? But it's almost like ties into the extreme left in this day and age, the socialistic, leftist, progressive, liberal movement, talking about toxic masculinity and throwing out the baby with the bathwater with healthy masculinity out as well. So it's about honoring also the masculine aspect of having strong boundaries, of being a warrior in this world, right? And not feminize man, for example, right? But, it's also bringing both aspects into balance within ourselves, the male and the female, and not like lopsided, like you mentioned at the beginning, that ties into spiritual bypassing.
Exactly. And I think, also this kind of self-work in the New Age movement to a certain extent just becomes a form of like narcissism, because it's all about, and I see people getting caught on this a while. And I know even for myself, like I got really addicted to like self-help books for a long time. And it was at the point where I was like, this is really like, it seems like I'm just looking for more stuff to, like of my own stuff to find out, And so New Age doesn't necessarily always have to be like this kind of love and light thing too. It can also be like reading like Wayne Dyer books, which is also obviously pretty New Age, but like doing this kind of self-work constantly, and also not making an attempt to be in the world as well. And it's always constantly trying to figure your own stuff out. And like, yes, a lot of us have a deep amount of work to do. It's actually quite never ending. But then we also have to make an attempt to connect to others too, And I think that even people who quote unquote aren't in the New Age movement, who get on the spiritual path, they can unnecessarily isolate themselves. And I know because I did this myself, because they're like, oh, I'm too sensitive. The world is too hard. And yeah, the world is hard, but that's actually where the work is. It's not about transcending the world. It's about being able to really be in the world and be of service where it's needed, And this doesn't mean by pushing our own love and light vegan agenda on other people, this being able to see everyone, where they are, and just and not have these ideas on how the world should be based on whatever makes us feel good.
Exactly, because this whole projection onto the, it ties also into what we're seeing on the matrix level, ties into the collectivism of the homogenization of humanity, the socialism, New World Order agenda of trying to make everyone the same. And then again ties into the New Age, one world religion, so to speak, which is kind of part of the agenda and whatnot, of very distorted, oversimplified, esoteric teachings and truths, and not recognizing the individual. And as you mentioned, it can indeed, and I've experienced it in my own work as well, become actually, the ego can hijack this process, and it becomes a very narcissistic process. That's constant self-work, just focusing on yourself. Oh, it's my reality, what I want to create now, and always kind of overly involved with yourself, so to speak, right? And there are periods too, like it's tricky because we're talking in general terms, right? And sometimes there are phases when we just need to focus on ourselves, our own stuff and wounds, right? Yeah. But then we can get lost in that.
Yeah, and and ultimately, like the deeper healing I found personally is when I took everything that I had developed, or quote unquote, I felt like I changed within myself in a sense, or I worked on, rather, maybe that's a better word to use. And then the real true practice is like going out in the world and like testing it out. It's like, okay, like, so say I've dealt with some certain aspect of myself and I've worked on it. Let's see how it is out in reality. Let's see if I can truly practice this and not just constantly, getting caught in our own bubble as well, and using reality as like our own test ground and inspiration, and not escaping into like an angel card reading to give us guidance. That's also another thing too with this is also, maybe we can just touch on this in the last part and go into it in more detail in the second part. Especially with like astrology and divination, like tarot cards, etc., you can also become too reliant on that for a form of like guidance. And I'm not talking about like a lot of tarot cards. Really good tarot card readers are going to be very intuitive. So they're just basically using the symbolism in front of them to kind of start a conversation about what they're sensing intuitively. Essentially, that's like a pretty. But then a lot of people like who are, astrology and tarot has gotten popular again. It's like because of the whole psychedelic movement, and the New Age movement is kind of getting its like wave with the younger generation, and that's great. But they also have to understand these are primarily intuitive arts. They're not about just looking to the tarot cards for information. It's about also being like, okay, like if you're really reading a tarot card in the true sense that it's meant to be, it's like, okay, like what's my connection to this card? Like what's actually happening? What is this showing me?
It's about revealing an internal process.
Exactly.
And like you said, they can be used as tools for a period of time. But, the more you're sincere in your own inner process, if all that entails, the more you are able to actually tune into what's really going on within yourself without the need of these outside tools, right? And I saw myself, I used to use tarot a lot, also was big into astrology, but then I used it to spiritual bypass, right? Yeah. Like, for example, astrology, this transit is happening, it's affecting my natal chart this way, so my mind was like creating, oh, this is why it's happening. So I was fooling myself. Now I understand it intellectually. I've healed it. So I use it as a bypass. Even astrology, as you mentioned, regarding tarot cards, is also a psychic art.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about, no, what does Moon conjunct Pluto means, looking it up on the internet, and that's that.
Yeah.
Right? So it is more, using them as tools, but also seeing the limitations, how you can easily abuse them. And as what they're definitely not about is about predicting the future, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, it's also like they're kind of like these training wheels to develop they're meant to be, I feel, training wheels to developing your own intuitive gifts, So I feel especially like, I know because I guess I think I like too many astrology memes on Instagrams, and sometimes like on the explore page on Instagram where you can see every random photo. I get a lot of astrology memes, and I see so much like people are just trying to find out if like someone this is also very common in astrology readers and tarot readings, but they want to find out if like someone likes them based on like astrology. Like that's a probably most common thing people use astrology and tarot for, is like, oh, let's check our synastry or whatever. But it's like also about developing that connection with that person. It's like, how do you feel when they're around? Like, who cares if you have Moon conjunct Sun, Venus conjunct Sun or something? It's like, what's your connection to them? Like, how do you feel? And being able to also, work with that, because I feel like that's what the true spiritual journey is urging us to develop, is like that higher spiritual and emotional intelligence, which is like from our state of being. It's not about resonating. It's about be tuning into these these laws of reality that affect all of us, and develop that deeper discernment as well. So I think, that's good for the first podcast. And
first hour of this episode.
Yeah,
I realized we barely scratched the surface. There's a lot to cover.
Exactly.
Right?
So I think I'll just kind of, these things we're going to cover in the second hour of the podcast, which is for members only. Maybe you can add some more. So we wrote kind of going into more detail about this, like space brothers and aliens are here to save us, and the whole channeled material stuff. Also the distortion of the twin flame concept, which I think is just hilarious in itself, but also gets used for people to get into abusive relationships, I've noticed. Also, I think we should talk more about what happens when you channel and call in these spirit guides and archangels and angels. Also, the whole vegan agenda, which kind of goes into the ungroundedness and head-centric way of living. We could also talk about this, like everyone calling themselves like a shaman or a goddess or a priestess and self-appointing themselves as under these words. And then also the Neo-Tantra, which is basically the distortion of tantric teachings as well. So yeah, all of that will be on the second hour of podcast on the Veil of Reality community. So if you're interested, you can sign up there. And yeah, we also have conversations going on there as well. So it's a really great place, especially if you want like a more safer space to like talk about things that come up in these podcasts. It's really incredible because it's way different from Facebook, where like you post something that's a little bit controversial and you get all these trolls, like people who aren't even friends with you will come on your thing and be like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But this is a place where people also can safely disagree with people, because the energy is way different there. So I highly encourage people who really feel the need to connect with other people, which is also an important part of this process, and talk about these topics, to try the forum out.
Exactly. Beautiful. Yeah. So tune in to the second hour for the members, and we go much deeper, and see you guys on the other side.